Hello, students. This is Harpreet Kaur Baweja, Associate Professor in the Department of English, posted at Government PG College, Sector 1, Panchkula. Under the initiative taken by Department of Higher Education, Haryana, for developing e-content for various subjects and various classes, I'm here today to take you on a journey of reading a story with me, that is with the photographer, written by Stephen Leacock, that is prescribed in your syllabus of semester 2 compulsory English. The textbook of literature and language for semester 2 BA is literature and language part 2, and the publisher is Orient BlackSwan. And the story with the photographer is the second story in that book. So let me welcome you all to the world of literature. We have listened to so many stories since our childhood, and whenever we watch movies also, they are just stories being enacted by the characters on the screen. So the learning objectives of this session are going to be, you'll be told about Stephen Leacock. We'll know who the writer is, and we'll also talk about what a story means and what are its key elements. We shall look at the elements of the short story with the photographer. We shall look at its plot, conflict, climax, and resolution. We shall be reading the story together, and we shall also try to appreciate the hidden humor, the underlying humor in the story. And I will help you to gain some insights on the theme, and meanwhile, it will also enhance your vocabulary. And you shall also be told about irony. The use of irony in the story by Stephen Leacock. So let us look at Stephen P.H. Butter Leacock. He was born in England in 1869, and he was raised in Canada, and he passed away in the year 1944. Stephen Leacock is a Canadian writer. He worked as a teacher in McGill University of Canada. He was a political scientist. He was a prolific, versatile writer, and he's largely known as a humorist. He had a lot of skill in creating laughter, evoking humor through the use of words. And his notable volumes of humorous essays and stories are Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town. It is a series of collection of humorous stories by Leacock. Then Arcadian Adventure with the Idle Rich is again a very witty and humorous collection of his funny sketches. Then Literary Lapses, Nonsense Novels, Frenzied Fiction, and the last which I have taken up is Behind the Beyond. So this book is again a collection of some of his extremely humorous stories, and the story which you have in your syllabus has been taken from this book only, Behind the Beyond. So the kind of writer he was, he earned a lot of fame as a humorist, and some awards and honors he also received during his lifetime. For example, the Royal Society of Canada awarded him the Lon Pierce Medal, and he also got the Governor General's Award for his non-fiction work, that is My Discovery of the West. And every year, for the best Canadian humorist writer, an award is conferred, which is called Memorial Medal of Humor, and it is dedicated to Leacock. And to pay honor and tribute to him, Leacock, many buildings have been named after him in Canada. For example, the Stephen Leacock building in McGill University. Then there's a school with the name of Stephen Leacock Collegiate Institute. And then when it was his 100th birth anniversary in 1969, Canada Post also issued a 6-cent stamp with the image of Stephen Leacock on it. There is also a mountain named after Stephen Leacock in one of the territories of Canada, that is in Yukon. So let us also see what another writer has to say about Leacock's skill and expertise and versatility as a writer. According to him, in the words of A.P. Herbert, Professor Leacock has made more people laugh with the written word than any other living author. And one may say he's one of the greatest jesters, the greatest humorist of the age. So, what is humor? Humor is the ability to make someone laugh, to be able to appreciate the comic side of life, to see funny comic traits and characteristics in people, situation, to be able to observe them and to be able to use this amusing element in evoking laughter. So somebody who's got a great sense of humor, we mean that he or she has the ability to make people laugh. He's funny. So, Stephen Leacock is considered to be a humorist writer. That means he has the power to create laughter in the readers through his writing, through the power of his writing. So, having said that, let's look at what a story means and what are its key elements. Student story, it is a narrative of events in the life of characters. So events are very important to make a story. If a story just has characters, they're just sitting and lying with certain emotions and certain traits of their certain qualities of head and heart, that will not lead to any movement or any action in the story, which is very important. So, story is always a narrative of events which the characters experience in their lives, and the five key elements of a story constitute setting, character, plot, conflict, and theme. I'll pick these up one by one. So, what is setting? Setting means the time and place of the story, like when and where does the story take place or the events in the story happen. Then we have the characters. Characters can be people, characters can be animals, or even absolutely super natural characters, right? And then we have the plot is the chain of events that take place in a story, and plot always has an introduction, a rising action, which builds up the tension and leads the readers or the viewers to the most exciting point in the story, which is the turning point, is also called the climax, right? And then the story starts moving towards the resolution of that intensity, the tense moment, and it ends with some kind of an outcome or result in the life of the characters. So then we have some kind of a conflict also as one of the main elements of the story. The conflict here means some kind of a problem, some kind of a struggle. So the conflict can be internal, it can be external. When it is internal, it can be happening within the character, like he himself is at war. His war at his war at war with himself. He's torn within. So when for example, a character who is battling between the pull of his heart and his mind. So he's torn between his heart and his mind. The call of his heart pulls him in one direction, and the call and the voice of his mind pulls him in the opposite direction. So there is a problem, there is a struggle within his own self which he is undergoing. Then we have external conflicts also in a story. We can have that. So that kind of a conflict may occur between a man and man. It can occur between man and society, man and nature, and man and technology. Then the fifth element of the story is the theme or the central idea, the which the writer of the story intends to communicate to his readers. So having said that, let us look at the story with the photographer from the point of view of these elements which I just talked about. So, the setting in the story is a photo studio, and as characters, there are just two characters, that is, a narrator and a photographer. And the conflict, it occurs between the narrator and the photographer, and the theme is that of appearance versus reality. Now, the plot, the chain of events that take place in the story is just that the narrator wishes to have his photograph taken, and with that intention, he visits the photo studio, and he wants his picture so that he can gift it to his friends as his memory, who can reconcile themselves to his loss when he dies. So, on his visit, he's made to wait for an hour at the first place. Then the stern and severe looks and attitude of the photographer make him quite uncomfortable inside. And then the photographer is so particular about the looks of a person that he makes insulting remarks about the narrator's face. And the way he treats the narrator is both annoying as well as amusing, and evokes laughter also. His amusing and absurd instructions which he gives to the narrator to strike a pose for the photograph, then his hard to please nature, his strange unusual behavior, and his obsession over attachment with his craft and skill, where he just wants the best picture to be taken out, and he hardly bothers about the need and wishes of his client who has come to him to seek his help in getting a picture made. So the photographer has his own standard of beauty, and he tries to measure his clients with that lens only. Then the narrator's the climax, the most intense moment is reached when the narrator gives out an angry reaction to photographer's comments on his picture. And it is at this moment that the picture gets clicked in the agitated state of the narrator. And this is the time when the reader wonder what would be the outcome, kind of a picture he would have. Would he be satisfied with the picture that photographer would have developed, or would he have some another verbal argument or exchange of heated utterances with the photographer? So as readers, one gets very curious to know what turn the events would take once the photograph is clicked in this moment, when narrator is just about to leave the studio, and he gets up and the photographer clicks his picture, and he feels very happy to have done that. He says that he captured it in a moment of animation and could capture the features also correctly. Then the next time when he visits to see the proof of his picture, the narrator is shocked to see that the picture hardly resembles his actual face. He's disappointed, he's frustrated, and very angry to see that he can hardly be recognized from his own picture. Then his firm angry outburst, where he rejects the synthetic, unreal picture taken out by the photographer as a worthless trifle. Worthless is useless, petty thing. So these are the various events which take us to the end, where the narrator leaves the studio very upset, very angry, almost in tears, and rejects the work of the photographer. As it was of no use for him, it did not match his real self. So the plot in with the photographer, it is a series of humorous actions and utterances that build up the moment of stress, that build up the point of extreme tension and excitement. And then we see an obvious clash, a very clear clash in narrator's expectations from the photographer and his hopes behind his coming to the video to get his picture clicked, and those of the photographer, his attitude and his expectations from the end result in the form of the picture. Then the climax, that is the most interesting point, is the time when the photographer finds faults in the facial features of the narrator and makes annoying remarks, and this results in an angry outburst of the narrator, and the picture is clicked at a very tense, aggressive movement, surprisingly and amusingly. So let's read the story together and see how all the events turn up, and how the poor narrator has to go through so much of pain and suffering, and he has to bear so much of insult and humiliation, and he becomes a victim of body shaming also at the hands of the photographer. But after going so much of pain and botheration, he still is not able to meet the purpose with which he visited the studio. So he turns out to be a pathetic figure at the end. But let us see. And you also, in between, try to make your own observations as we read the story, and just do not accept what is being told to you. So the story begins with this opening line of the narrator who goes to the studio to get his picture made. "I want my photograph taken," I said. The photographer looked at me without enthusiasm. Without enthusiasm, enthusiasm means without any interest. Bina ruchi ke. He was a thin man in a grey suit with the dim eyes of a natural scientist. But there is no need to describe him. Everybody knows what a photographer looks like. So here we get to know the appearance of the photographer. He was thin, he had dull eyes, and he looked like a natural scientist. Who was a natural scientist? Somebody who was born with the instinct and curiosity to study things carefully, thoroughly through experimentation and tests. So, at the first superficial level, the narrator found the photographer uh, a natural scientist from his demeanor, or from his conduct, and from his looks. So he seemed to be busy in a very serious affair in his studio. And the photographer says something to the narrator. He says, "Sit there," he said, "and wait." I waited an hour. I here is the narrator's voice. Narrator is giving his own experience. He's telling his own experience of getting the photograph taken when he visits the studio. So he had to wait for a full 1 hour. He was made to wait at the studio by the photographer. And what did he do during this time? He says, "I read the Ladies' Companion for 1912, the Girls' Magazine for 1902, and the Infant's Journal for 1888. Now, these were the various magazines, fashion magazines, where the pictures of models, were carried, and he just flipped through the pages to pass his time. I began to see that I had done an impertinent thing in breaking in on the privacy of this man's scientific pursuit with a face like mine. Impertinent means rude, something ill mannered. So here the narrator makes this observation. It seems as if while flipping through the pages of these fashion magazines and the journal, where the models appeared in beautiful picture shots, he probably started comparing his own looks with those of the models, and became somewhat conscious of his inadequacy of appearance. Because the next comment in the next very sentence, he says that perhaps he was being made by the photographer to wait, because he had such a face that was not so much interesting, or so much worthy to be considered by the photographer as worthy of being given some time, or some of his devotion, scientific devotion in the studio. So here we get to know that the narrator has some kind of an insecurity with respect to his looks, and he has some kind of a complex also, because he says that with a face like mine, he has perhaps been rude and in-mannered to visit the studio with a face like his, and to intrude in the privacy, the solace, and the solitude of this photographer, who was busy in a scientific pursuit in his studio, probably. So after an hour, full hour, the photographer opened the inner door. "Come in," he said severely. Severely means harshly, firmly. I went into the studio. "Sit down," said the photographer. Now the words being used by the photographer are just uh, commands, as if he is an authority in his studio, and therefore he is a man of few words, and he just asks the narrator to behave in a particular way and to do something or the other, sit there and wait, and then come in when he asks him to come in. And the third thing he says is sit down to the narrator. Now, the antics of the photographer, the silly, absurd, and ridiculous behavior of the photographer, if evokes a lot of humor in the story. The photographer rolled a machine into the middle of the room and crawled into it from behind. He was in only a second, just time enough for one look at me, and then he was out again, tearing at the cotton sheet and the window panes with a hooked stick, apparently frantic for light and air. Then he crawled back into the machine again and drew a black cloth over himself. Now, here he has very wittily and humorously painted a caricature of the photographer. Like he brought his paraphernalia, the camera on the tripod, brought the machine into the center. Then he went into the lens to have a look at the narrator's face, and the next very moment he again came out and felt that there was little light and air, and he desperately feeling very disturbed, he tried to draw in more light by removing the fabric from the window panes. And again he crawls back into the machine and draws covers himself with a black cloth. And this time the narrator says he was quiet in there. I knew that he was praying, and I kept still. Now, this is a very humorous thought on the part of the narrator to compare the photographers being busy in his camera, covering himself with a black cloth, being quiet, and the narrator compares this situation with that of being in prayer, as if he was praying. So when the photographer came out at last, he looked very grave and shook his head. The face is quite wrong, he said. So the photographer was still not happy with what he was able to see through the lens of the camera. He though tried to draw in light, in more air, but he found the face of the narrator not right for the picture, and he made this rude and nasty comment, unpleasant remark on his looks. I know, I answered quietly. I have always known. He sighed. He here is the photographer. I think, he said, the face would be better 3/4 full. I'm sure it would, I said enthusiastically. Enthusiastically is with enthusiasm, utsaha ke saath, for I was glad, I was happy to find that the man had such a human side to him. So would yours. After this, the narrator was about to pass his remarks on that anybody who has a hard, limited, or narrow face, if he is captured with an angle of 3/4 of the face, then he naturally his picture comes out to be wide and better. And as he was making this remark, the photographer ceased to listen to him. He just stopped listening to the narrator. So he was hardly bothered about what the narrator was saying. I would like you to know what a 3/4 face means. So you can look at the three angles with which these three pictures of the faces have been shot. The first view is the profile view. And the middle view is the 3/4 view, or the 3/4 face view, which the photographer says would make the narrator look better. His face would look better if his picture is captured through the 3/4 angle. And then we have the front view. So these are the three angles with which the face is captured by the photographers in the studio. And the 3/4 view of the face is just the intermediate view of profile and front. And you can clearly see that the middle picture, it shows the face fuller and wider as compared to the left and right side picture of the woman face. So Let us read further. So the photographer had ceased to listen to the narrator. He came over and took my head in his hands and twisted it sideways. I thought he meant to kiss me, and I closed my eyes. But I was wrong. He twisted my face as far as it would go and then stood looking at it. He sighed again. I don't like the head, he said. Now here there is a use of situational irony by the narrator or by the writer. How, like, the moment the photographer came and held the head of the narrator in his hands and twisted it, the narrator closed his eyes. Now he had this amusing humorous thought that probably he would receive a kiss from the photographer. That is why he had come out of his paraphernalia to hold his head in his hands. But on the contrary to his expectations, he further twisted his head. Probably he was trying to adjust his head to the right pose where he could capture his picture nicely. But the photographer, instead of giving him a kiss, he sighed in disappointment and made another unpleasant remark about the looks of the narrator and said that I don't like the head. Firstly, he said that the face was quite wrong, and now he says that the narrator's head is also not to his liking. And this is the situation irony, what the narrator expected the photographer to do and what actually he did. So this is the example of situational irony. So next, the photographer's instructions given to the narrator to strike a particular pose create a lot of humor in the story. Open the mouth a little, he said. And the moment the narrator opens the mouth like this, I started to do so, that he receives another instruction from the photographer. Close it. And then he again closes it. He added quickly, now the ears are bad, he says. The ears are bad. Droop them a little more. Thank you. Now the eyes. Roll them under the eyelids. So he is he's telling the photographer to do one thing or the other, as if the photographer is a circus animal, and as if the narrator is a circus animal and the photographer is a ringmaster who's making him dance to his tunes. So the poor narrator just keeps on doing whatever he's being told. Put the hands on the knees, please, and turn the face just a little upwards. Just expand the lungs. Expand is to make your lungs wider. So, and bend the neck. That's it. Just contract the face. Contract is make it thinner or narrower by squeezing it. Something like this. It's just a too full. But now he finds something wrong with the face again. That it's full in excess. It's wide, very wide. Now, till here, the narrator was just doing everything quietly, just bearing all the insult and humiliation that was being hurled upon him by the unpleasant remarks of the photographer. But now he loses his calm and he asks the photographer to stop, and he gives an emotional outburst. He loses his calm, he loses his patience, and becomes angry. He says, this face is my face. It's not yours, it's mine. I have lived with it for 40 years. I know it's false. I know it's not beautiful. I know it wasn't made for me. But it's my face, the only one I have. Such as it is, I have learned to love it. And this is my mouth, not yours. These ears are mine. Probably the machine is too narrow. Now he tries to find fault with the photographer's machine to turn the tables on him or to take his own revenge. And here, the portions which I have underlined in this emotional outburst of the narrator, I would like you to pay attention to this. We get to know that the narrator is 40 years old because he says that I have lived with this face of mine for the last 40 years. And then he is very much aware of the flaws or the shortcomings in his appearance. He says he knows the faults or the weaknesses in his face, and he knows that it is not even beautiful. So this again confirms our previous observation in the beginning of the story, where we say that when he says that he has probably done some kind of a rudeness by bringing this face of his to a photographer who's a kind of a scientist busy in his scientific pursuit. So he says that he knows that it's not beautiful, but he has learned to love it. He has accepted the way it is, though it must have taken him some time to overcome this complex, maybe, or this insecurity of not being that beautiful. But now he has learned to love it, and he definitely would not like anybody to reject him or to tell him that it's not good. As long as it is his, not anybody else's, no one has the right to reject it or to hurt him with these words. So here, having said this, I started to rise from the seat. He was about to leave the studio, and snick, at that moment, the photographer clicked his picture. Snick is the sound made by the camera. The photographer had pulled the string, the photograph was taken. I could see the machine still shaking from the shock. I think I caught the features just in a moment of animation, said the photographer with a pleased smile. Now, I would like to make a comment here. See, the moment that would seem the least appropriate to any normal person for clicking a shot, it satisfies this photographer as a moment of animation. Animation means a moment of energy, a moment of life where there is some action and movement. He is happy to have captured the features of the photographer when he was in that agitated state. Now, this is so absurd and silly on the part of any photographer, for that matter of fact. So the poor narrator's picture gets clicked at a time when he is so upset, when he is hurt, when he has lost his calm, and when he is telling the photographer how annoyed he has felt with the kind of treatment he has received in the studio. So then he wants to have a look at his picture at that moment, and the photographer says that he will be able to show him the proof on Saturday. So he invites him to his studio on Saturday. So what happens when the photograph is out? Till that point, when his photograph was clicked, that was the most exciting point in the story, where the reader is left wondering what will be the reaction of the narrator to see his picture. Would the picture meet his expectations, or would there be a further clash or heated exchange between both the photographer and the narrator? So I have written P for photographer here and N for narrator. Let's read the story further. So the photographer is quieter and graver than before, and he has certain pride in his manner. The narrator has visited the studio and he is waiting for his picture. The photographer, he unrolls the large photograph before him, and both look at it in silence. And the first reaction which the narrator gives is it me? I asked. He's not even able to recognize himself. The photo is so much unlike him. The eyes don't look like me very much. They don't look like mine. And the photographer says, "Oh, I have retouched them. They come out splendidly, don't they?" Splendidly here means, don't they look very impressive? The photographer is very happy to have retouched the eyes of the narrator and have changed them totally to satisfy his own sense of beauty or standard of beauty. So and then narrator says, "But surely my eyebrows don't look like that." "No, the eyebrows were removed. They're removed. We have a process of putting in new ones. I don't like the hair low on the skull." Narrator, "Oh, you don't you?" I said. Photographer, "No, I don't care for it. I like to get the hair back further and make out a new brow line." Narrator's bitterness and the proud photographer's indifference to the narrator's pain. Narrator says, "What about the mouth? Is that mine?" I said that with a bitterness that was lost on the photographer. He says, "It's adjusted a little. Yours is too low. I found I could not use it." "The ears," narrator says, "those strike me a good likeness. They're just like mine." The photographer says, "Yes, that's so, but I can fix that all right in the print. We have a process for removing the ears entirely. I'll see if." Now look at this man. He has changed all the facial features of the narrator, leaving his ears only, and he is very happily proposing and making an offer to the narrator that he would definitely remove the ears and replace them with the new set of ears in the final picture. He is very happy with his art and craft and all the chemical processes he used to create this new picture, which does not resemble the narrator at all. He is happy that at least it is beautiful. At least he has been probably able to make the narrator look handsome in it. But this is a kind of biting insult to the narrator, and he's so pain deeply hurt that he gives out a final outburst and leaves the studio in tears. He says, "Listen, I came here for a photograph, a picture, something which, bad though it seems, would have looked like me. I wanted something that would depict my face as heaven gave it to me. Humble though the gift may have been, I wanted something that my friends might keep after my death to reconcile them to my loss. It seems that I was mistaken. What I wanted is not done." Heaven here means God. Humble here means ordinary. Reconcile means to accept, to make yourself come to terms with the situation. Mistaken is wrong. So, the purpose with which the narrator had visited the studio was to have a picture that looked like him, a picture which he could give to his friends so that they could keep it as a memory after his death, and they could connect to him, associate with him, and relate themselves to it. But this picture had totally changed the identity of the narrator, and this was so painful for him. The whole purpose of his visit, of his going through all that suffering at the hands of the photographer, was defeated, and he feels very much humiliated. What I wanted is not done. And the angry outburst continues. The narrator's emotional speech, he makes fun of the photographer's art and has the final word on the photographer. He shows his hatred for his craft. He tells him, "Go on then with your brutal work." Brutal means cruel, heartless work tum kar rahe ho. Take your negative or whatever it is you call it, dip it in anything you like, remove the eyes, correct the mouth, adjust the face, restore the lips, reanimate the necktie, reconstruct the waistcoat. Now, this is not only sad, but it is also very humorous, because he tells the photographer to reconstruct not only the features but also change the clothes if he is not happy with them, and keep on using his art or craft in whatever changes he wishes to bring. Coat it with an inch of gloss, shade it, gild it, to cover it with a layer of gold, till even when you acknowledge that it is finished, then keep it for yourself and your friends. They may value it. To me, it is but a worthless trifle. I burst into tears and left. So here the narrator makes fun of and mocks at the photographer's artificial craft, and his wounded self-esteem, his own hurt self-respect gives way to tears, and that's how the story ends. Now, the resolution, students. The narrator has his last emotional outburst when he sees that the purpose of his getting a photograph stands defeated. His self esteem is terribly hurt. He leaves the picture behind, calling it a worthless trifle. Worthless is useless, trifle is something very petty, sorry, very small. And then he bursts into tears, he starts crying. Now, the theme which the writer has dealt with is that of appearance versus reality. The narrator, though he's bitterly hurt, he has his last say when he strongly advocates and stands for reality over appearance. Appearance means ढोंग या pretense या झूठ या दिखावा. Reality is सच्चाई, हकीकत. So no matter how hard the photographer tried to push his idea of beauty, his perception of beauty on the narrator, but the narrator resists. He opposes all such attempts of the photographer, first passively, not very confidently, but later very aggressively during his second visit. So there is a growth in the narrator from submission, from a surrender, where he is receiving everything which is being said to him by the photographer on his looks, and the instructions being given to him to do this or that while striking a pose. From there, from that situation, he becomes a very, very assertive man who will not have any kind of trash and garbage thrown before him in the name of being beautiful. If it is not him, if it is not real, then he rejects it. He just does not accept it. So initially, the narrator was somewhat submissive and unresisting, unopposing towards the photographer's fault-finding attitude. Now, this could be due to an insecurity rising from his not matching the standard of beauty projected by the models in the magazines and journals he had scanned while sitting for an hour in the studio, or maybe due to the photographers shaming him on on his looks through his derogatory remarks. So the same narrator overcomes this insecurity and lack of confidence and victimization by strongly voicing his resistance to the changed facial features in the end. He rejects the photographer's synthetic, brutal, heartless craft by leaving his picture in the studio at the end. So just as the photographer was rejecting the narrator's face, his features throughout the process of taking his picture, similar and was proclaiming his devotion to beauty at even the cost of ignoring reality, we see the narrator turns the tables over the photographer during his second visit when he uh, gives a no, and he totally rejects and opposes and turns aside the picture that is presented to him by the photographer as a piece of art. So he calls it a useless, a petty thing which is of no value to him. If his face was of no value to the photographer, he says that his picture, the photographer's unreal, though beautiful picture, is also of no value to him. So he outrightly condemns the photographer's artificial insertion of beauty, and he decries, he criticizes his insensitivity to the emotions of others. The narrator also exposes the photographer's fascination for appearance and falsehood over real, and his false perception of beauty, which sees everything through a standard lens and is judgmental. So, with the photographer, the last word on it is indeed a witty and humorously written story by Stephen Leacock. While recounting the narrator's bitter experience of getting a photograph clicked in a studio, the writer tickles the funny bones of the readers at various points in the story and also reinforces the theme of appearance and reality. So, what makes you look beautiful when you get yourself clicked? I think it's a smile. So, don't forget to smile, say cheese, and there you go, the pictures got clicked. Thank you so much. We've done part one, and I shall get back to you and we'll discuss the textual exercises of this story when we meet again in part two of With the Photographer. Till then, happy studying and happy learning, students.